When the fleet of 300 Calarian ships appeared on the radar screen, the entire Earth held its breath. Satellite stations collapsed, cities on the ground illuminated by thousands of plasma bullet flashes. An explosion shook the atmosphere. It was the first warning. If we don't run, we will be crushed. The year was 2542 TL, an era that humanity had christened the Age of Frontier Exploration. The United Earth Confederation, UEC, had expanded its influence to 47 colonies, housing millions of people. Human civilization, having prioritized peace and civilian development, maintained a modest space military fleet of only about 50 warships. The rest were commercial vessels, mining ships, passenger carriers, and exploration craft. Despite centuries of searching, humanity had yet to encounter definitive proof of extraterrestrial intelligence, though many fervently believed in its existence. Captain Elaine Carter, 38, stood on the bridge of the UES Vanguard, staring at the holographic projection of their mission path. As commander of the UEC's Rapid Response Team, Carter was known for her cautious approach and decisive action when necessary. Her original mission had been straightforward: complete a survey of the Alpha Proxima system and potentially establish humanity's first contact with an alien civilization. "Captain, I'm detecting an unusual signal," Lieutenant Hana Lee called out. The 32-year-old communications specialist's fingers danced across her console. "It's coming from Sector XJ-127, approximately 1.2 light-years from our current position." Lieutenant Marcus Reyes, the chief engineer, looked up from his station. A known innovator responsible for the Vanguard's FTL drive and close-range laser weapon systems. His brow furrowed with concern. "What kind of signal?" "It contains prime number sequences and matrix equations," Lee replied, her voice tinged with excitement. "Definitely artificial in origin." Ensign Victor Oz, the 28-year-old navigator with an adventurous spirit, swiveled in his chair. "Captain, this could be it, the proof we've been searching for." Carter studied the data streaming across her screen. This was potentially the discovery of the millennium, but her intelligence background made her wary. Rumors of the Calarian Empire, ruled by Emperor Vexhai, had reached UEC intelligence channels before. They spoke of a civilization that had conquered over 10,000 worlds through their fast attack, quick surrender doctrine. The last intelligence report suggested that the Calarians had deemed humans too primitive to bother with. Carter made her decision. "Plot a course to the signal's origin. We're going to take a small detour from our scheduled survey route." "Captain," Reyes cautioned, "if their technology is as advanced as the signal suggests, we should proceed with extreme caution." "Noted, Lieutenant," Carter replied, "but this opportunity is too significant to ignore." As the Vanguard altered its course, Carter opened a channel to Earth. Admiral Karen White and Marshal Crane, leaders of the UEC Defense Force, would need to be informed. Their response was divided. White advised careful observation, while Crane expressed concern that the Vanguard's independent action might violate the UEC's non-interference policy. Ultimately, the UEC board voted to support Carter's decision, maintaining a peaceful approach to avoid unnecessary conflict. On April 12, 2542 TL, the Vanguard emerged from FTL travel in the orbit of Zetha 8, a planet in the XJ-127 system. Lieutenant Lee confirmed that the signal originated from a Calarian vessel, commanded by Admiral Therax. The message carried an implicit welcome to an inferior species seeking to join the Empire. "Let's respond with mathematical sequences," Carter ordered. "Establish a common language." As they transmitted their reply, the Vanguard's defensive systems automatically assessed the incoming Calarian signal as a weapons threat. Without warning, the ship's shields activated, and a long-range laser beam targeted the Calarian vessel. "Deactivate weapons!" Carter shouted, but Reyes hesitated. "Captain, lowering shields now could leave us vulnerable." Before he could finish, a plasma beam from the Calarian ship struck the Vanguard, severely damaging its FTL drive. The dream of peaceful first contact shattered in an instant. "All hands, battle stations," Carter ordered, knowing they were outmatched. "Begin emergency protocols." The Vanguard managed to send a fragmented distress signal back to Earth before being forced to retreat. Admiral White faced an impossible choice: trust Carter's report or dismiss it as an overreaction. Meanwhile, Marshal Crane was already advocating for war preparations. The UEC issued a retreat order: withdraw and avoid further engagement. Carter had no choice but to abandon her diplomatic efforts and limp the damaged Vanguard back toward Earth, carrying the news of their disastrous first contact. What should have been a historic meeting of civilizations had become the prelude to an interstellar war, all because of a technological misunderstanding. After the Vanguard's retreat, the Calarian Empire decided to assert its authority through its first invasion campaign targeting the solar system. Admiral Therax reported to Emperor Vexhai that these primitive humans had dared to fire upon their ship, an insult that could not be ignored. During the Calarian Imperial Court meeting, Vexhai dispatched 3 military divisions, totaling 150 heavy warships, to capture 3 strategic human targets: Haven's Rest, an ice planet in the asteroid belt; Kepler Station, a space station and industrial center in another system; and Nova Terra, an old colony with underground cities. Haven's Rest was defended by Captain Tony Ramirez, a 38-year-old retired naval commander who had become a security advisor on the ice planet. Alongside him were Chief Engineer Alina Novak, an ice mining expert skilled in setting mines and making asteroid bombs, and Lieutenant Sarah Wang, a medical corps volunteer who had transformed rescue stations into covert military coordination centers. When the Calarian fleet of 50 ships entered the asteroid belt, Ramirez refused their 1-hour ultimatum to surrender and instead implemented the asteroid belt strategy. As the Calarians advanced, the rigged asteroid belt exploded according to Novak's carefully calculated pattern, instantly destroying 7 enemy ships. "They thought we'd surrender at first sight," Ramirez said over the comm channel, as explosions lit up space like deadly fireworks. "Let's show them how humans fight when cornered." The defenders faced not only the enemy, but also plasma storms and collapsing ice formations. They navigated through frozen underground rivers in armored vehicles, planting mines as they went. Alina Novak struggled internally with the contradiction between her Earth preservation beliefs and her current role as a bomb maker. "I wanted to protect worlds, not destroy them," she confessed to Ramirez during a brief moment of respite. "But sometimes you have to destroy to save." "We're not destroying worlds," Ramirez replied. "We're destroying those who would destroy worlds." At Kepler Station, a space station housing over 20,000 engineers and workers, Commander Lisa Vance, who had previously assisted Carter in communicating with the Calarians, quickly transformed production systems into heavy weapons manufacturing. Engineer Danny Scott converted metal printing lines into railguns, while pilot Raj Patel led the effort to transform material transport ships into suicide cannons. When the Calarians attacked, they were met with railgun fire that shattered their ships from 800 kilometers away. Cargo pods rigged with explosives penetrated enemy shields, destroying 5 more heavy warships. A conflict arose between Lisa and Raj when he wanted to deploy all civilian ships early, while Lisa worried that, without proper command, they'd be completely destroyed. Danny Scott mediated between them, demonstrating that mining technology could indeed break destructive technology of the enemy. His improvised railguns, repurposed from ore crushers, proved devastatingly effective against the Calarian warships. "We don't need military hardware," Scott declared, watching a Calarian cruiser split in 2 from railgun fire. "We just need human ingenuity." Nova Terra, humanity's oldest colony, was built underground to avoid the planet's intense solar radiation. Colonel Janet Ross, a 42-year-old former Army officer, had prepared emergency hiding plans in cave systems 3 kilometers deep. Lieutenant Miguel Alvarez, an expert tunnel digger, rigged Garon ore traps that could explode and create localized earthquakes. Medical doctor Amina Patel established underground infirmaries while secretly producing explosives from biological compounds. The defenders had to combat both enemy troops and hazardous terrain filled with toxic gases and cave-ins. When the Calarians deployed sophisticated mine-detecting drones, Dr. Patel revealed her innovation: modified herb-like flowers that released gas to conceal the mines, causing the drones to crash into traps. Nature and technology can work together, Dr. Patel explained, as they watched drones malfunction in the flower-filled tunnels. The Calarians understand only technology. We understand both. Nova Terra held out for 48 hours before the defenders were forced to retreat to the deepest tunnels. Though the colony was eventually captured, the humans had destroyed 12 enemy ships and killed 4,000 Calarian soldiers. In 3 weeks of fighting, humanity, despite being outmatched 100-fold, had destroyed 60 Calarian warships and killed 8,000 troops, forcing the Empire to reconsider its strategy. Admiral Therax realized for the first time that humans were unlike any species they had encountered before, feeling a mixture of terror and admiration. On Earth, Captain Elaine Carter received the news. The Vanguard had been destroyed. Marshal Crane sent a brief message. Emergency meeting called. Prepare all options. The enemy is out there. Admiral Karen White convened the Earth Defense Council, joined by Marshal Derek Crane, Dr. Maria Santos, head of the Resistance Research Institute, and Captain Carter, who had barely escaped the Vanguard. The Calarian fleet is mobilizing 300 heavy warships and 500 support vessels, heading directly for the solar system. White informed them grimly. Estimated arrival, 6 months. Dr. Santos presented their situation. Our colonies have sacrificed themselves to buy us 3 months. We now have a maximum of 3 months to prepare our defenses. She outlined Plan Omega. All civilian ships, cargo carriers, commercial vessels, passenger ships, and mining craft will be converted into suicide weapons equipped with mini-nuclear mines and automatic guidance systems. The Moon Weapon Station will be transformed into a space seismic cannon capable of penetrating enemy shields. Marshal Crane argued for surrender and territorial concessions, but Dr. Santos and Captain Carter vehemently opposed. If they reach our orbital center, Earth is finished. Admiral White made her decision. Anyone who doesn't cooperate with converting ships into weapons will bear responsibility for the consequences. Preparations began immediately. Lieutenant Hannah Lee supervised the installation of mini-nuclear mines on 200 large commercial vessels. Lieutenant Marcus Reyes adjusted FTL drives to silently approach areas with minimal enemy radar coverage. 50 self-propelled radar satellites were positioned around low Earth orbit to detect the enemy fleet from a distance of 5 million kilometers. The asteroid barriers near the Van Allen belt were reinforced to create temporary walls against smaller Calarian ships. Captain Carter established the Moon Guardian Force, consisting of 50 former pilots and 20 warships, mostly retrofitted patrol vessels. Dr. Maria Santos opened a resistance training school on the Moon, teaching orbital mine setting and Calarian radar hacking techniques. However, civil unrest grew as frightened citizens were evacuated to underground shelters. Many clashed with the ship conversion teams, refusing to commit suicide. Colonel Mike Turner, in charge of militia coordination, had to reassure them, "If you don't help, you'll die anyway when the Calarians come." Beyond her defense coordination duties, Captain Carter sought to establish secret communication with a group of Vanguard survivors hiding near Jupiter, hoping to gather intelligence about Calarian weaknesses. She struggled between her responsibility to preserve the lives of her crew and the need for information to defeat the enemy. The Moon glowed red with activity as defense preparations intensified. Radar data illuminated the space maps, while Earth's inhabitants watched laser beams flash across the night sky, symbols of the inevitable struggle to come. The transformation of 200 civilian ships into suicide asteroids represented the conversion of civilian tools into weapons of war. As the day of confrontation approached, the pace of preparations accelerated, creating a sense of urgency and tension throughout human territories. On October 16, 2542, TL, the Calarian fleet of 300 heavy warships, led by Admiral Helrax, appeared at a distance of 2 million kilometers, approaching the Van Allen belt. The resurrected Vanguard radar, operated by survivors near Jupiter, sent a warning signal. This is the largest Calarian fleet in Imperial history. Earth's defense force comprised 18 regular UEC warships, survivors from the colonial battles, positioned in the outer ring for preliminary interception. The converted civilian ships, 47 vessels, were organized into the Suicide Attack Formation, Omega Fleet, divided into 4 clusters. The first cluster would charge directly into the center of the Calarian fleet. The second cluster, equipped with rocket artillery and mini-mines, would target the left and right flanks. The third cluster would provide surface control support for the Moon railgun system. The fourth cluster would use asteroid barriers to guide the Calarians into a trap. The Moon railgun, with 10 launching platforms capable of penetrating multiple Calarian shields consecutively, was positioned at the South Pole, disguised as a mining station. If we maintain formation, Omega Fleet can break through. Captain Carter communicated to Captain Alex Turner, who commanded the 5-star class warship UES Empyrean. Turner fired his ship's 4-beam cannons at the enemy command vessel, creating an opening for the suicide ships to charge through. The space battle became chaotic, with blue laser beams intersecting red plasma rays. Disabled ships burned, and debris floated aimlessly in space. The Calarians discovered the Moon railgun system, firing continuously, and diverted 20 support ships with rocket artillery to counter it. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Hana Lee hacked the enemy guidance systems, causing 5 Calarian ships to crash into the asteroid belt and explode. The 47 Omega ships, artificial asteroids, charged straight into the Calarian formation. Some succeeded in destroying 15 heavy warships, but 43 Omega vessels were lost in the process. The casualty report was staggering. Humans lost 12 main warships, 203 Omega civilian vessels, and over 18,000 officers, crew members, and civilians. The Calarians lost more than 130 heavy warships, 60 support vessels, and thousands of troops. Admiral Helrax was furious when radar revealed that humans could penetrate through defense lines, even at a distance of 1 million kilometers. He ordered intensified, destructive laser beams to be fired at Earth's atmosphere. Captain Carter launched on the last warship, UES Sentinel, pursuing the Calarian command ships and forcing Helrax to retreat. In the climactic moment, Carter and her crew had to choose between sacrificing shields or withdrawing, as the UES Sentinel had only 5% energy remaining. They decided to expend all remaining ammunition to protect Earth. "Where is our final frontier?" Carter questioned internally. "What is the boundary between freedom and suicide? Am I leading people or dragging them into a meaningless sacrifice?" In the end, she decided to raise the flag of resistance and ordered the remaining ships to follow, making Helrax understand that humans no longer feared death. When Helrax commanded burn the entire orbit, part of his fleet was unexpectedly redirected, hacked by operators from the moon station, and crashed into Earth's secondary command ship, disabling the central command system. This temporary confusion opened an opportunity for Carter to fire directly at Helrax's primary command ship. The Calarian fleet was forced to withdraw, leaving behind wreckage and technological artifacts. Earth was severely damaged, millions dead, major cities in ruins, and atmospheric layers contaminated. The UEC had achieved a moral victory, but its main fleet was almost completely destroyed. Amidst the devastation, Dr. Maria Santos operated the enormous antenna array at the Moon Observation Station, transmitting a galactic open letter. Humanity may be defeated, but never subjugated. We have struck fatal blows to the heart of your empire, making you tremble with fear. Do not think humans can be coerced. Remember our final words, our sole warning: run. The message, accompanied by a technical copy of the Resistance Handbook, Human Guerrilla Tactics, was transmitted at light speed, reaching planets under Calarian domination. Emperor Vexai heard the message and laughed contemptuously, but coldly ordered increased suppression. Almost immediately, dozens of satellite worlds, Zelthara, Vegan, Altaria, Centauri, and others, began guerrilla movements modeled after human resistance tactics. General Moruk, who had participated in the conquest of human territories, received orders to mobilize patrol ships and mercenaries to eradicate completely. However, news about the solar system made his soldiers tremble, questioning, if the Calarians couldn't defeat humans, can we defeat ourselves? Captain Elaine Carter survived the battle and became a resistance symbol. From commander of a survey ship, she became the spokesperson for the Resistance Alliance, advocating for human descendants to migrate to other star systems and supporting rebel groups throughout the galaxy. She learned that spiritual strength can be 100 times more powerful than technology, and used the network of colonies to build a freedom alliance against the Empire. Lieutenant Hannah Lee continued to support hacking groups, creating a disguised guidance network to help rebels launch surprise attacks across the galaxy. Dr. Maria Santos sacrificed herself immediately after transmitting her message. But her ideas lived on, passed from mouth to mouth among the oppressed. The old colonies formed the Interstellar Resistance Union, establishing mutual protection agreements. On the Calarian homeworld, some nobles from conquered planets began to doubt the Empire, conducting espionage activities and covertly supporting humans. On the surface of the Moon, the ashes of the Maria Observation Station smoldered. Captain Carter stood gazing at Earth in the distance, saying, "Earth may die, but we still have many lights to nurture hope. We have not only alarmed the Empire, but also sown faith in hundreds of thousands of souls. They will rise up, and when they do, the entire galaxy will not be able to stop the waves of freedom." The screen gradually faded to black, with only the words remaining. "This is not the end. This is only the first warning." 3 years after the Vanguard's fateful encounter with the Calarian vessel, the United Earth Confederation faced an existential threat unlike any in human history. The once thriving network of colonies and Earth itself had been decimated by Calarian attacks. Yet something unexpected had emerged from the ashes of defeat, a spirit of resistance that burned brighter than any star in the galaxy. Captain Elaine Carter stood on the observation deck of the lunar outpost Artemis, the last functioning military installation in the solar system. Through the reinforced viewport, Earth appeared as a wounded sphere, its once blue oceans now tinged with gray, its land masses scarred by orbital bombardments. Yet it still rotated, still existed, a testament to humanity's desperate defense. "Status report on the Diaspora fleet," Carter asked, her voice carrying the weight of countless sleepless nights. Lieutenant Marcus Reyes looked up from his console. "The last civilian transport left Mars orbit an hour ago. That makes 37 ships that have successfully departed the solar system in the past month. Estimated passenger count, 120,000. Carter nodded. A small victory in an ocean of defeats. The diaspora strategy, scattering human survivors across dozens of uncharted systems, had been controversial. Many argued they should concentrate their forces to defend Earth. But Carter knew better. The Calarians had the numbers, the technology, and the ruthlessness to exterminate humanity if they remained clustered in one system. "And the Resistance Handbook transmissions?" she asked. Lieutenant Hannah Lee, who had survived 3 separate Calarian attacks, smiled for the first time in weeks. We've confirmed reception on 53 occupied worlds. The encryption has held. Calarian intelligence hasn't been able to block the signal. The handbook's guerrilla tactics are spreading, Captain. The Resistance Handbook had been Dr. Maria Santos's final gift to the galaxy. Before the Calarian bombardment had destroyed her lunar laboratory, she'd compiled everything learned from Haven's Rest, Kepler Station, and Nova Terra into a tactical manual. The document detailed how technologically inferior forces could effectively combat Calarian military doctrine. Its final page contained only 5 words. Our sole warning, run. Those words had become more than a threat. They were a promise, a rallying cry, and for the Calarians, increasingly, a source of genuine fear. I have something you need to see, Lee said, pulling up a holographic display. We intercepted this from a Calarian military channel. The display showed footage from the mining world of Zelthara, a planet conquered by the Calarians a century before humans had even developed interstellar travel. The video was chaotic, explosions ripping through a Calarian garrison, local insurgents wielding improvised weapons. Above the garrison flew a crude banner bearing the words, Our sole warning, run. This is the 3rd uprising this month, Lee continued. They're using our tactics, the asteroid belt ambushes from Haven's Rest, the industrial sabotage from Kepler Station, the tunnel warfare from Nova Terra. Carter felt a complex mixture of pride and sorrow. The resistance was spreading, but at what cost? Haven's Rest was now a radioactive graveyard. Kepler Station had been torn apart, its fragments scattered across its star system. Nova Terra's underground cities had been flooded with toxic gas, killing millions. Any word from Admiral White? Carter asked. Reyes shook his head. The last transmission from the UEC headquarters bunker was 3 days ago. We must assume the worst. Carter turned away from the viewport, facing her small team, the last remaining officers of what had once been humanity's proud exploration force. Then, we're on our own. Not entirely, came a voice from the doorway. Carter turned to see Colonel Janet Ross, her uniform dusty from the lunar regolith, her face bearing new scars since their last meeting. Behind her stood a group of soldiers Carter didn't recognize. Their uniforms were neither UEC standard nor from any human colony she knew. Who are they? Carter asked. Allies, Ross replied. From Centauri Prime. They've been under Calarian rule for 5 generations. They want to learn how we fought back. One of the aliens stepped forward, humanoid, but with violet skin and eyes that reflected light, like a cat's. I am Commander Vexel. We intercepted your Resistance Handbook. For centuries, we believed the Calarians were invincible. You proved otherwise. Carter studied the alien commander. The handbook wasn't meant to start a galactic uprising. It was meant to ensure human survival. Yet it has done both, Vexel replied. Across 12 systems, resistance cells have formed. The Calarians are spreading thin, trying to contain them all. Lieutenant Lee brought up another holographic display. Confirmed reports of Calarian military redeployments. They've pulled forces from 53 subjugated worlds to deal with uprisings. Their central command is showing signs of strategic overextension. For the first time in months, Carter felt something like hope. The Calarian Empire had conquered thousands of worlds through overwhelming force and the reputation of invincibility. Once that reputation cracked, everything changed. We need to coordinate these uprisings, Carter said. Turn isolated resistance into a unified rebellion. That's why we're here, Ross explained. Commander Vexel's people have maintained secret faster-than-light communication channels the Calarians never discovered. We can link resistance cells across hundreds of light years. Carter turned to the alien commander. Why help us? You don't know humans. We didn't free your world. You showed us something more valuable than freedom, Vexel replied. You showed us possibility. For generations, we accepted Calarian rule as inevitable, like gravity or death. Then we saw your people, Technologically inferior, vastly outnumbered, inflict the first military defeat the Empire has suffered in 1,000 years. The aliens' reflective eyes seemed to glow brighter. The Calarians call it the Battle of Terminal Warning. Did you know that? Your last transmission has become the name of their greatest humiliation. Carter looked back at Earth, its wounded form still beautiful against the blackness of space. We lost our homeworld. But not your species, Vexel countered. And now, because of what you started, dozens of enslaved species have found their courage. The Empire is facing simultaneous uprisings across 12 sectors. They're calling it the Terminal Warning Syndrome, resistance spreading like a contagion. Lieutenant Reyes joined them at the viewport. What exactly are you proposing, Commander? An alliance, Vexel said. Not just between our peoples, but between all who wish to break Calarian rule. We have the communication network. You have the tactical expertise. Together, we can coordinate resistance across the Empire. Carter considered the proposal. The UEC was effectively gone. Earth was barely habitable. The surviving humans were scattered across dozens of systems in hiding. A conventional military victory against the Calarians remained impossible. But conventional warfare had never been humanity's strength in this conflict. Admiral Therax called humans vermin after Haven's Rest, Carter said. He meant it as an insult, but there's truth in it. Vermin survive. They adapt. They multiply. And when there are enough of them, they can bring down empires. She turned to face her team and their alien visitors. We'll coordinate with your resistance network. We'll share everything we know about fighting the Calarians. But understand this, we're not fighting to defeat the Empire militarily. That's impossible. We're fighting to make their victory so costly, so painful, that they'll eventually decide we're not worth the effort. You wish to bleed them until they retreat, Vexel observed. Exactly, Carter confirmed. The Calarian Empire is built on efficient conquest. We need to make ourselves profoundly inefficient to conquer. Over the next month, Carter's team worked with Vexel's communication specialists to establish what they called the Shadow Network, a system of encrypted transmissions that bounced between abandoned mining relays, derelict satellites, and forgotten communication buoys. Through this network, resistance cells on dozens of worlds began sharing intelligence, coordinating attacks, and implementing the tactics from the Resistance Handbook. The response from the Calarian Empire was swift and brutal. Emperor Vexi ordered mass executions on worlds where resistance had emerged. Entire cities were vaporized from orbit as warnings. But for every resistance cell destroyed, 3 more appeared elsewhere. 6 months after the formation of the Shadow Network, Carter received the news she'd been waiting for. A Calarian battle group had abandoned its occupation of Proxima Centauri, the nearest star system to Earth, citing resource allocation priorities. They're retreating, Lee confirmed, analyzing the intercepted Calarian communications. Not just from Proxima Centauri. Reports are coming in from 7 other systems. Not retreating, Carter corrected. Consolidating. They're pulling back to defensible positions, abandoning outlying territories they can no longer control efficiently. Either way, Reyes said, those are liberated systems. Carter nodded. And places where our scattered people can begin to rebuild. The pattern continued over the following year. The Calarian Empire, facing unprecedented resistance across its territories, gradually withdrew from system after system, focusing its military might on defending its core worlds and most valuable resources. The cost of maintaining its vast empire against a galaxy-wide insurgency had become prohibitive. On the 2nd anniversary of the Battle of Terminal Warning, Carter stood on the surface of the moon, at the crater where Dr. Maria Santos had made her final transmission. A memorial had been erected there, a simple obelisk bearing the names of Earth's defenders and the 5 words that had changed the galaxy. Lieutenant Lee approached, her breath fogging inside her helmet. "Captain, We've received a transmission from the Calarian High Command. It's unlike anything they've sent before. Carter followed Lee back to the lunar base, where the command staff had gathered around the central holographic projector. The message was audio only, transmitted in perfect English. To the human resistance leader known as Captain Elaine Carter, this is Grand Admiral Kalen of the Calarian Imperial Fleet. I am authorized to offer terms for mutual disengagement of forces. The Calarian Empire will recognize the sovereignty of human-controlled systems and a buffer zone of 30 previously contested worlds. In exchange, human forces will cease providing tactical support to insurgencies within designated Calarian sovereign territory. The room fell silent as the message ended. "Is this legitimate?" Carter asked. Lee nodded. "We've verified the encryption signatures. This came directly from their high command." "They're offering peace," Reyes said, disbelief evident in his voice. "Actually recognizing human territory." "Not peace," Carter corrected. "Détente. They're cutting their losses. The cost of fighting us and all the resistance movements we've inspired has become too high." "Do we accept?" asked Colonel Ross. Carter stared at the holographic representation of the message. "We need to consult with the other resistance leaders. This affects more than just humanity now." In the days that followed, the Shadow Network buzzed with encrypted communications as leaders from 24 species debated the Calarian offer. Some advocated accepting immediately, arguing that recognized sovereignty was the best they could hope for. Others insisted on fighting until the Empire was completely dismantled. In the end, the decision fell to Carter, as the symbolic leader of the resistance that had started it all. She composed her reply carefully. "To Grand Admiral Kalen of the Calarian Imperial Fleet, humanity will accept the recognition of sovereign territory and cease direct support to insurgencies within your recognized borders on one condition. All sentient species currently under Calarian rule must be given the opportunity to vote on their continued membership in the Empire. Those who choose independence must be granted it without reprisal." Carter knew it was an audacious counteroffer, one the Calarians would likely reject outright. But to her surprise, after 3 tense weeks, a response came. "The Empire will permit supervised independence referendums in contested territories where active insurgency exceeds specified thresholds. All other terms accepted." It wasn't complete victory. The Calarians would retain many of their conquered worlds. But the empire that had once seemed invincible, eternal, and absolute was now negotiating with those it had dismissed as vermin. 1 year later, the Treaty of Artemis was signed on the lunar surface, at the same spot where Dr. Maria Santos had broadcast her defiant message. Representatives from 37 species gathered to witness the historic moment as the Calarian Empire formally recognized the independence of 83 formerly subjugated worlds. As the ceremony concluded, Commander Vexel approached Carter. "Your people paid the highest price for this moment," the alien said. "Earth remains mostly uninhabitable. Your species is scattered." Carter nodded, acknowledging the truth of these words. "We lost our homeworld but saved our soul, and in doing so, we helped others save theirs." "What happens now?" Vexel asked. Carter looked up at Earth, still scarred, but showing the first signs of recovery as automated terraforming systems began the centuries-long process of restoration. "Now we rebuild, not just human civilization, but something larger. An alliance of free worlds that will ensure no empire can ever threaten us again. And if the Calarians break the treaty, if they rebuild their forces and return," Carter smiled grimly, "then we remind them of our warning." That night, as the Earth cast its light over the lunar landscape, Carter stood alone at the memorial obelisk. She traced her fingers over the engraved words that had transformed from a desperate threat into a galactic symbol of defiance. "Our sole warning, run!" Below them, someone had added a new inscription. They ran. In the decades that followed, humanity slowly rebuilt from the ashes of near extinction. The scattered colonies that had fled during the diaspora established a loose confederation, united not by centralized government, but by shared history and determination. Earth itself remained sparsely populated, its environment slowly healing under the careful management of ecological specialists. The Treaty of Artemis held, though not without challenges. Twice, Calarian hardliners attempted to reassert control over liberated worlds. And twice, they were repelled by the combined forces of the newly formed Mutual Defense Alliance, a coalition of formerly subjugated species who had learned the value of standing together. Captain Elaine Carter lived to see her 90th birthday, by which time she had become more legend than person in the minds of many. Children across dozens of worlds learned about the commander who had transformed a desperate last stand into the spark that ignited galactic liberation. On her deathbed, surrounded by the surviving officers of the Vanguard and representatives from 15 allied species, Carter was asked if she had any regrets about the path that had led from first contact to that moment. "Only one," she replied, her voice weak, but her eyes still sharp. "That we didn't get to meet the Calarians as friends first. Perhaps someday, when the wounds have healed and generations have passed, our peoples will find a better way to coexist." Then she smiled, the expression brightening her aged face. "But I don't regret teaching the galaxy that freedom isn't given, it's taken, and that even the smallest resistance, if resolute enough, can change everything." When Carter passed, memorial services were held on 97 worlds. On the Moon, her ashes were interred beside the obelisk, bearing the 5 words that had become her legacy. The ceremony was attended by humans and aliens alike, including, to the surprise of many, a delegation from the Calarian Empire itself. The head of the Calarian delegation, a high-ranking diplomat, placed a ceremonial weapon at the base of the memorial, a traditional sign of respect for a worthy adversary in Calarian culture. "Why honor her?" a human official asked the diplomat afterward. "Her actions cost your empire countless worlds." The Calarian considered the question. "Before your species, the empire had conquered for 1,000 years without meaningful resistance. We began to believe domination was our right, our destiny. Captain Carter didn't just save her people. She saved ours from the rot of unchallenged power." The diplomat looked up at the obelisk, at the words that had once terrified the Empire's military command. "In our histories, this conflict is called the Humbling. It is now required study for all Calarian military officers, to remind them that true strength lies not in technology or numbers, but in the will to endure." A century after the Battle of Terminal Warning, Earth had recovered enough to support larger populations again. The first city to be rebuilt was named Santos, in honor of the scientist whose last act had changed the course of galactic history. At its center stood a museum dedicated to the Resistance, housing artifacts from Haven's Rest, Kepler Station, and Nova Terra, along with the salvaged components of the Vanguard. The museum's most visited exhibit contained a simple display, a recreation of Dr. Maria Santos's transmission station and the text of the message she had broadcast across the galaxy. Visitors from hundreds of worlds came to see it, to touch the console she had used, to stand where she had stood. On the bicentennial anniversary of the battle, a grand ceremony was held in orbit above Earth. Ships from every member of the Mutual Defense Alliance gathered to commemorate the moment when humanity had faced extinction and instead found its greatest strength. The highlight of the ceremony came when a massive holographic projection appeared between Earth and the Moon, visible from both surfaces. The image of the Vanguard, the ship whose misunderstood signal had started it all, beneath the words that had ended an empire's unchallenged reign. As the projection faded, a message was broadcast to all ships and settlements in the solar system, transmitted simultaneously in 217 languages. 2 centuries ago, humanity stood alone against an overwhelming force. Today, We stand together with friends and allies across the galaxy, united not by conquest, but by mutual respect and the shared belief in freedom. The Battle of Terminal Warning taught us that no power is invincible, no cause is hopeless, and no warning is more powerful than the simple truth that a people determined to be free can never truly be conquered. In the Calarian Imperial Archives, a special section was dedicated to what they called the human anomaly, the inexplicable defeat that had transformed their empire. Military theorists still debated how a technologically superior force, with overwhelming numbers, could have been repelled by a species with no previous interstellar combat experience. The most respected analysis, written by Grand Admiral Kalin before his death, concluded simply, "We had conquered worlds, but the humans had something we had forgotten. They had something worth dying for. When faced with extinction, they chose resistance over surrender, not to save themselves, but to inspire others. In that moment, they transcended from a military threat to a philosophical one. We could destroy their ships, bombard their planets, and slaughter their people, but we could not extinguish the idea they had released into the galaxy." The final line of his analysis became famous throughout Calarian military academies. "We did not lose to human weapons. We lost to 5 human words." The legacy of the Battle of Terminal Warning extended far beyond military history. It fundamentally altered how spacefaring civilizations interacted. The era of imperial conquest gradually gave way to diplomatic engagement and mutual defense pacts. The Calarian Empire, while still powerful, was transformed, ruling through influence and economic ties rather than military might. 300 years after the battle, humanity had spread across hundreds of worlds, its population recovered and thriving. Earth, once nearly destroyed, had become a sacred site, part memorial, part museum, part living monument to resilience. Most humans lived on colony worlds, returning to Earth only for pilgrimages or ceremonies. On one such ceremony, marking the tercentenary of the battle, the great-great-great-granddaughter of Captain Elaine Carter stood at the lunar memorial beside representatives from over 300 species, many of which had not even been known to humans during the original conflict. Together, they unveiled a new monument, a simple sphere of polished stone, half embedded in the lunar soil. On its surface was carved a representation of the galaxy, with a tiny arrow pointing to the insignificant star system, where, against all odds, an empire had been given its sole warning, and had ultimately chosen to run. As night fell on the lunar surface, the gathered representatives returned to their ships, leaving the monument illuminated by Earth's reflected light. In the silence of the airless landscape, it stood as a testament not to military victory, but to the enduring power of a simple idea: that freedom, once imagined, cannot be unthought; that resistance, once demonstrated, cannot be forgotten; and that even the smallest light, if brave enough to shine, can illuminate an entire galaxy.